The most difficult part of the novel to write is the opening and the closing. We know this because when we sit down to write, that's the part of the book we write and rewrite and rewrite. So today we're going to talk about why those two parts of the novel are the most difficult and what we can do to make them better. Join me. You have a story to tell, but you don't know where to start. Let me show you how to free your story. I teach you how to write and how to dig deep in your soul to release your story and make a difference in the world. Welcome to the Julia Monte channel. If we're just meeting, I am Julia Monte, a women's fiction author. And today we're going to talk about openings and closings. So this is a challenge for a lot of writers. I would say for most writers. And nobody gets up and says, I'm going to write this book, and then gets up and writes the best opening ever. It usually takes a lot of rewriting to get that opening just right. A lot of times we don't even start, or where we start does not end up being the opening of the book. And this is because we're just getting started. We think we're ready. We might have outlined, we've got the opening scene, but then as we start writing and we get into chapter 2 or maybe chapter 3, we start to realize that, you know what, this is where the book really starts. This is where the opening is the most interesting, and this is where I'm going to be capturing my reader's attention the most. And so, you know, it is difficult to try to figure out where to begin sometimes. And sometimes we get it right. Sometimes we know, like, this is the start of the novel, and but it still needs a lot of tweaking and a lot of fixing to get that novel just right, so that it really hooks us. That first sentence, that first paragraph is, you know, killer, and it's getting the attention of the reader just the way we want it to, at least what we hope will happen. The other part is the ending, of course, because the ending is another place where it has to be just right. And I often write and write and write and write until I get to the ending. Then I may cut some of the stuff that I wrote to get to the ending. And then it's, again, because it's another part of the novel where we really want to make sure that it's right. Because the ending is where the reader leaves satisfied. They read through this whole novel that you wrote, and now they finally got to the end, and it has to catch them. It has to be the right ending. It has to be the conclusion that is expected, but maybe it's also a little bit of a twist. Not huge. It has to be something that is, again, it's kind of expected that it's going to end this way. And it depends on the genre, of course. So for women's fiction, it's all leading to hopefully a happy ending. So it is going to lead where the reader is expecting it to lead, but it still has to be interesting and unique enough that it's not just like, oh, okay, I knew exactly what was going to happen. Okay. Sometimes it is, you can't avoid it. I mean, they're going to live happily ever after. Romances, they're going to live happily ever after. And that is what the reader is expecting. It's just, how are they going to get there? And then how are you wrapping things up at the end? So if you've been following my videos, you know that I took a little vacation, went on a drive out to, our final destination was South Dakota to go see Mount Rushmore, but we enjoyed the drive and the country, you know, the drive through Wyoming, beautiful sunsets, beautiful, just beautiful all the way around. A lot of greenery, a lot of farms, a lot of cows. It was a lot of fun and relaxing, which is something that I needed. So while I was on this trip, what I ended up doing is I wanted a book that was just kind of fun and easy to read, and something that I don't tend to normally read. So I picked up a James Patterson book, and it was called The Russian. And as I'm reading through, his chapters are very short. So if you've never read one of his books, then you probably don't know that his chapters tend to be like, maybe they can be a page long, but they're 2, 3, they're never that long. Okay. So they're never, I don't think he has a chapter that's more than 5 pages, and probably not more than 4 pages. They're very short. They're almost like scenes. Each chapter is a scene. But what he's really good at, and he also has a team of writers, and what they're very good at is creating a great opening and creating a great closing. And so every opening hooks you, and every closing ends with some kind of question or ends with something. So I want to read. I wrote down just an example of one of the things he wrote. It says, I'd like to say I was more than ready to face the day when I sat down at my desk in Manhattan North Homicide Office, but that would be a lie. Okay, so why is this a good opening? Well, because it sets the expectation for the reader. Okay, so the opening tells us that, first of all, it's going to be a tough day for this detective, and he is sort of expecting that it's going to be a tough day. And not only that, but the reader is expecting that it's going to be a tough day. Something is going to happen that is going to make it rough for him, and we know. Now, so it doesn't have to be like an amazing, just something that blows the reader out of the water every single scene, right? But every scene should have a little opening that gets us in there, makes us ask a little question and wonder what's going to happen. And typically, if we've done a good job and we ended the previous scene, we kind of know how the next scene is going to open. If we ended it with what I'm going to suggest now, which is a little bit of a hook. Okay, so with this opening, we know that it's going to be a tough day for him. Something's going to happen. He knows this, we know this, and we just want to read to see what it is that's going to happen. How is this day going to be tough? Depending on what happened before, we can sort of start to guess what is going to happen, but we don't know, so we're going to read to find out. What you want with this opening scene is to create a question and a little bit of foreshadowing. So what is going to happen? Something's going to happen here, right? And so this question, this opening scene question, creates that foreshadowing. It lets us know that something is going to happen, and that creates enough interest to get the reader to read more. Then the other thing that a good opening will do is it not only does it create a little foreshadowing and has a question that the reader will read to find out the answer to, but it also creates a little bit of maybe suspense. Okay, it doesn't matter what type of book you are writing, it creates a little suspense where the reader just is not sure and is a little uneasy about what is going to happen. Are they going to break up? Is he going to pop the question? Is the child going to get into a car accident after he drank too much and got into a car? So it creates this sense that a little bit of tension in the reader, so that they want to read that scene to find out exactly what is going to happen. Okay, and the other thing that your openings should do is it should make us care about the character. Again, it's just a line, so it's not huge. So when I'm saying this, I don't want you to start thinking, well, I've got to do all of this with one opening, with one line. Yes, but not not everything at once. Like one opening might be a little more suspenseful, right? And another opening might be more of caring for the character. What is going to happen to this character as the character gets into a car after drinking too much? What's going to happen as the hero walks in and finds that, whatever, right, that the love of his life has left him a note and a suitcase is gone, right? So we care about him. We care because we think, oh my gosh, well, what is going to happen? He's losing the love of his life. What's he going to do next? We care about him because we've come to care for him during the novel. So at different points, different openings, different chapters, different scenes, we're going to have the hook's going to be slightly different. At some points, it might be a little suspenseful. At other points, it might be that we're worrying and we have some tension. At other points, it might be that it's creating caring and sympathy for the character. Okay, so these are some of the things that you're going to do in the opening. So it's not just every opening, every scene or every chapter that you begin, you want to look through that and say, okay, how am I hooking the reader into this scene or into this chapter? Now, let's talk about the closing. So if you've ended the previous scene or chapter correctly, you have created some questions and tension in the previous scene that is going to kind of be answered in the next scene, right? So that's another thing that the opening is going to do, is it's going to promise that you're going to answer that question that you asked, or that question that you sort of posed the previous scene. And this next scene is going to probably answer that. Now, sometimes what some writers do, I tend to do this a lot if I have different characters, is the next scene isn't really going to open with what happened in the previous scene with one character. I will jump to a different character and create this, so that there's always sort of that question. I'm waiting to find out what happened with this other character, but now I'm going to learn something new about character B, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to respond. I'm going to answer the question for character A that I left sort of unanswered in that scene, if that makes sense. So let's talk about the closing. So again, I'm going to read a closing of Patterson's that he had. So we're talking about this detective again, Michael Bennett. So he has this closing, but I couldn't leave my partner alone, especially when he made it clear he needed support. I only hoped not to embarrass Harry again. Okay, so what has happened here is that he's being investigated. Well, he's not being investigated. It's it's somebody that from the mayor's office in New York who is wanting to find out how he's solving the case, and he's sort of a pain, and the detective wants to sort of get rid of him, and so he's being really sarcastic, and he's being sort of a jerk to this guy because the guy is getting in the way. He doesn't really want to answer questions that he has, and so he's gotten in trouble a few times for being sarcastic, for doing really silly things like saying, I'm going to be right there, just sit down there, and then he leaves and he never comes back. So he's gotten in trouble, and he's basically sort of not been taken off the case, but this aide, the mayor's aide, has been assigned to somebody else, and now his partner, and now his partner has to deal with this guy, and he's like desperately needs help, and he's giving him the eye like, oh, please come save me from this. So this is the way that the chapter ends, to make us want to say, okay, like, what is the detective going to do to this guy next? It's not major, but it's sort of this little tiny subplot that is in a way kind of funny, because we know how annoying people from government institutions can be. And so here's this guy he's trying to solve this murder, and this guy just doesn't think he's doing it right, and he doesn't know anything about what he's doing, and he wants to publicize everything, which the detective doesn't want to do. So this is why he plays these little games with him, and it's kind of fun. Like, we want him to play these games with this guy, and we want him to sort of lead him in the wrong direction, and we're curious, like, what's he going to do next, and is he going to get in trouble again? So that chapter ending is light, right? It's not part of the murder. It's actually part of the little subplot, but it's interesting and it's funny, and we want to turn the page to see, like, okay, does he get in trouble? What is he going to do to this guy next? Okay, so your chapter endings don't have to always be intense. They don't always have to be leading that main plot, sort of ending that main plot, because you can't every single time. There has to be some kind of subplot. There has to be some light parts to your novel, and those can be also interesting little hooks at the end that the reader's going to turn the page to find out. So the important thing about a closing is that you want to entice the reader to keep going. You want them to turn that page and move on to the next part of it to find out what's going to happen. And as I mentioned, your opening is going to promise to open it. You're not going to answer that question on the first line. You're just going to promise that you are going to be answering the question or solving the sort of the mystery that you set up in the previous scene. You want your reader, when they get to the end of that scene or the end of that chapter, to go, oh man, I wanted to go to sleep. I wanted to close this book so bad. I'm so tired, but now I have to open it and I have to see what happens next, right? You want that closing to be a hook, and that hook to keep them reading. You don't want them to put the book and say, oh, that was such a great, satisfying ending, and I'm going to, that was a great end to that chapter, I'm going to go to sleep now. Because you want them to keep reading. You want them to stay up till 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. You want them to finish your book. Okay, so the closing has to be a little bit of a hook, and it has to pose some kind of question. It has to pose some kind of tension. It has to do something that is going to entice the reader to want to turn that page and keep reading. And what you're really doing is you're teasing the reader, right? You're teasing them a little bit, and they love it. We've learned how to do this from watching these TV shows, right? From just years and years of watching how they do it. They get to the end of the scene, and maybe you're like, oh, okay, maybe I'm just going to turn the channel and see what's else glasses on and we get to the end and we're like, oh man, no, now I got to get through this darn commercial, or I got to fast forward through this commercial so that I can get to the next part. I'm not going to be able to change the channel and go see how something else is happening, what's happening in this other show, because I want to see what's happening in this show. I want to continue to watch it. So that's what you're doing. You're kind of teasing them that this is what I'm going to tell you. This is what I'm going to show you. Don't go anywhere. Stay there. And I promise it's going to be worth it. So that's what you're saying at the end of each scene or end of each chapter. You're like, okay, hold on. There's something else coming and you're not going to want to miss it. Okay. So you're teasing them. And again, readers love it. We love it because it's like, oh yeah, this is exciting. Okay, I want to keep watching it. Okay, I want to keep reading it. And if it wasn't like that, then we wouldn't care. We wouldn't be excited about it. So we kind of actually want that. We want that as readers and viewers. We want that little tension, a little kind of that little irritation that now I have to keep watching it and I can't go on and do something else. Okay, and what are you closing with? What are you adding? It could be a number of things. It could be an unexpected revelation where they're like, oh wow, they're gonna find this out, or it could be something shocking that the reader wasn't expecting, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh wow, I didn't see that coming. Let me see what is going to happen here. What's going to be the result of this? Something revealing, something shocking, anything that is going to, again, make the reader want to see what is going to happen. I didn't expect this, or I was expecting this and I saw that it was coming and now this happened, and now what's going to happen next after this? Okay, another good closing sentence is something that ends sort of with an action or kind of an incomplete action, right? So we've all seen this where like the hero is running and he's, somebody's chasing him with a gun, and all of a sudden he gets to like this place and there's nowhere for him to go, and he's like looking like, where am I going to go? Where can I climb up? And I have nowhere to go. And then all of a sudden the scene ends and you're like, okay, now how is he going to get out of this? We know he's going to get out of this. It's not the end of the book yet, but how is he going to do it? He's got a gun pointed at his head and he has nowhere to run. What's going to happen? So we turn the page to find out what's going to happen. And then the next opening scene, we don't tell them immediately what's going to happen, but we promise that we're going to solve it. Or sometimes we do tell them immediately, like it's like, oh, something, we see exactly what's going to happen in the next scene. Okay, and so that's another possibility for an ending. So there are many ways that we can end chapters, we can end scenes to get readers to continue to want to read. So you just have to be obviously a little creative and see what works for your novel. But don't feel bad if this doesn't come right away. I don't write great openings and great closings. And I go back and I revise the ones that I can. Sometimes I've written myself into a situation where a chapter does end just perfectly. And what I mean by perfectly is this sort of this kind of happy, everything looks perfect. And I have thought when I get to those chapters of what can I do to not end it that way, because I don't want them to close it and say, okay, it's perfect. Sometimes I can fix it. Sometimes I really can't. I really need the chapter to end there, and I need it to end well, because it's been super tense, and all of a sudden we've gotten to a situation where things have wrapped up and it is the end of that chapter, and I really can't add a better hook. And the hook is really that everything, there's been that payoff, right? There's been that payoff that everything that has gone on, maybe there's been many fights, or there's been situations why the hero and the heroine could not get together, but finally they've had this romantic dinner or evening, and that is it is the perfect ending for that chapter, because it does wrap up and it pays off what the reader has been struggling with this couple to see how they're going to end up. The danger there is that they will close the book and say, oh, thank goodness, okay, and not see like what else is going to happen. So something else is going to happen. So this is something I struggle with. It's like, okay, how do I do I do want to end it there, but I don't want them to close my book and not keep reading. So sometimes it is a little tough, and so you have to decide, is this the right ending? Can I end it like this, or should I do something else to make it seem like, okay, yes, it was beautiful, it was a great payoff, but something's going to happen right before that chapter ends to show that no, things are not as good as they seem, and so there's something else that's going to happen. So again, this might not happen right away. You might have to go back and do the revision and rethink and say, do I want to change something? Do I want to add a stronger hook? do I want to change this opening so that, again, it's not, it's not telling them something immediately, but it's giving them the promise that this is in this scene, in this chapter, I'm going to reveal something, show you something, and respond to what happened previously in the book. Okay, so those are openings and closings. Again, they're a little bit more of a challenge than the rest of the book. Some people say the middle is a bigger challenge, and we might talk about that at some point. But they are important, right? Because it is what it attracts the reader, and it is what keeps the reader coming back for the next book. So we do want to pay special attention to that opening and closing. And usually if we can get those two right, the rest of the book flows much better because we know where we're going, we know how it's starting, and we know how it's ending. And definitely during revision, because we know those two things and we've written those two things and they're good, we can go through as we're revising the rest of the book and make sure that it's matching those two and that it's good. Okay. So I hope that this is helpful to you. If it is, please hit the like button and share this video with others. And I will see you again next Friday.